everyone, welcome to MMA Overdrive for Jazz TV. Today's edition is all about fights we as fans would love to see. So take a seat, grab your proverbial pens and paper, and let's get a scouting for MMA Overdrive's top 5 version of fantasy fighting matches. First up, who would like to see a little brother versus brother action? I know I would, and by brothers I mean the Diaz Brothers. Now that would be a fight for the books. They each have a unique blend of boxing and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so it would be great to see how that fight would play out, especially with all that smack talking they're so famous for. Second on the list of interesting matchups, let's take GSP and match him up against fellow welterweight champion Ben Askren. And why, you ask? Well, simply because they both have some of the sickest wrestling moves in the sport. So who would trump who in this MMA wrestling arena? Or would it turn into a glorified kickboxing match since their wrestling abilities would ultimately negate one another? Such thought-provoking questions are why this is a fantasy fight we'd like to see. Moving on to number 3 on the list of fantasy fighting matches, or in this case, a fantasy rematch fight. How about Quinton Rampage Jackson versus Rashad Evans? Whenever one of them opens their mouth, it's only a matter of minutes before the topic of conversation veers towards the other. I don't know about you, but I prefer watching their fists do the talking instead. Next up, placing 4th on the list, are 2 fighters who embody the best of what the knockout business has to offer, Roy Nelson and Sean Jordan. There is no weight class where brick-handed justice is more appreciated than the UFC heavyweight division. It's a collection of huge men who all have the power to take out the opposition with just one punch or a well-placed kick, and the heavies do so with great frequency. Last but not least, let's match up Alistair Overeem versus Junior Dos Santos. They were scheduled to fight on more than one occasion in the octagon, but it never came to be. From an entertainment perspective, this is definitely a fight the fans would want. The squeaky clean image of Dos Santos and the bad boy rep of Overeem would give the fight an interesting plot. Good versus evil, literally. Well folks, that brings us to the end of our list. Thanks for tuning into this edition of Fantasy Fighting Matchups. Perhaps some of these fights will indeed materialize, but only time will tell. What fantasy match would you like to see? For MMA Overdrive, I'm your host, Jasmin Chase. See you next time.